At the CIPD, we believe that people management and development should be principles-led, evidence-based and outcomes-driven. But what do we mean by evidence-based practice? And how will it really help us make a difference? In this short video, you'll hear from leading proponents of evidence-based practice about what it is and how it can help us make better decisions.
This is how it usually goes. I'm a manager and I have to make a decision. Are we going to do this? We have an assumption, if we do this, that will come out. Then we solve this problem. And that decision is typically made in most organizations based on my own personal assumption, my own personal experience, or what some of my colleagues will tell me. The problem is if you base your decisions on just one source, well, our brain is a very sophisticated decision-making machine. We can make very good decisions. However, we have to feed our brain with good quality evidence. So not only one source of evidence being my personal opinion or your experience, because that is actually a very untrustworthy source of evidence. And our brain will then jump to conclusions, fill in the gaps by seeing patterns or causal relations or whatsoever. So it is very important that we feed our brain, our decision-making capacity, with sufficient amount of good quality evidence.
We live in an era in which there's a huge overload of opinion and information. We talk now about being in a post-truth era. Who can you trust? What can you trust? An evidence-based practice is the attempt to sift through that.
When we refer to evidence-based practice, we mean making decisions based on the best available evidence. And with the best available evidence, we mean more sources, multiple sources, but also critically appraised. So we look at the evidence that we have before we make a decision, and we try to figure out, is this indeed the best available evidence, and how trustworthy is this evidence? And based on that if you take such an approach, you will be able to determine what the probability is that your solution will solve your problem, given the evidence you have at hand.
I think there's a danger that in terms of people management practices, we end up going around in circles over time. Certain practices fall in and out of favour without any real evidence base on whether they work, whether they achieve what they set out to achieve. But we're guided by what seems to be popular, what's talked about, and evidence-based practice is a move away from that.
If you look at some criteria that we've tried to draw up for comparing professions, I think HR doesn't do great, doesn't do that well for a number of reasons, and there's a number of indicators I think of that. The first is I think HR is still quite into things like fads and fashions and exciting new ideas, and in general, any evidence-based profession, you would expect them to not get so excited about new exciting things, but instead focus on a body of evidence that's been built up over a long time about different interventions.
Oh, the last thing we want to do is to turn practitioners into academics. I mean, these are very different areas of expertise. A key idea with regard to evidence-based practice in HR is to recognize that where we have good quality scientific evidence to support HR practice, we should be using it. But there's many areas in which we don't have good quality evidence, but that doesn't mean that the practice of HR couldn't be evidence-based, but it may mean we need then to use organizational data.
In many ways you need some kind of translation between the two domains. And what I see in some of my research is actually that if you don't have some kind of relationships between research and practice, it's very difficult actually to apply the knowledge. I think it's a two-way street from practice to research, but also from research to practice.
I think there's three areas of focus in developing one's HR practice and HR acumen. First and foremost, it is the idea that you're doing systematic reading to prime the pump of your decision making. If you're going to, you don't necessarily have to read journals, but read books and articles that are based on summaries and synthesis of what the science says. Second issue would be understand your organization better. to make good decisions, we really do need a good understanding of the logic of what makes the organization effective and successful. And that means investment in good information systems to follow employees and their development. And I do think that HR leaders very much are important sources of organizational information. But unless you ask the questions that are needed to understand what it takes to make the organization effective, you're not going to be in a position to go seek out the kind of organizational data that are needed. So the third skill of an effective HR practitioner is the ability to ask questions, critical questions about what works, how things work, and why.
I think that there's a growing awareness within the HR profession, and including within the CIPD, that we need not only to be conducting research and generating sort of new insights, we also need to be sifting through what are the most reliable research-based insights on some of the core, both new and also perennial questions of people management.